Hello, friends. This is the Grow Podcast. I'm Wendy Jo, and this is Ashley.
Hey, Wendy, how's everything going today?
I'm a little sad and excited at the same time because this is the last Grow Podcast of season one.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even, golly, like it really just hit me. So first of all, I know we just talked about it, but it just like really hit me. Now we are in the last episode of the season of the year.
Yeah, it's the last one of the year too, I think, although it might go into 2024 because
Yeah.
we've got a bunch of episodes in the can, but maybe not. It's the end of the season though, and it's been a really deep and provocative spiritual ride for me. What are your thoughts about it?
Me too. I feel like I've grown a ton when I think back when we first started and we were just like getting to know each other. And I remember when I realized early on that like we were growing each other in our spirituality. Like it was just, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but there was this moment in time where I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like we're both literally growing and us coming together grows each other.
Yeah, that's how I've felt like this. So we hardly knew each other, at the beginning, and but we did kind of feel like we had a little bit of chemistry when we did the Ed show, and that was the last show of the Ed show that I interviewed you,
Yeah.
and the actual. Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but the last show for now.
Yeah.
It's hard to say goodbye to projects for sure. So that is continuing in different ways, which is very cool, and I'm just kind of seeing how that evolves. But there was something very poignant about that, you being on the last show, and me. I really felt like we were in sync, but we didn't know each other, and we decided to embark on this journey, which it's not just a podcast to me. It actually has inspired me to go within again. It inspired me to look at where I have been on my path and how I actually kind of veered away from it in many ways, and just kind of pulled me back in to remember who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. And then just the synchronicities with us has been very, very cool. So I've loved the journey. It gives me a framework where each week, we're talking about different topics, and yeah, it just put me right back onto the spiritual path that I really had veered from in many ways.
Mm. Yeah, and I remember too, like that was one of the things that you were wanting to get back on your spiritual path. And look, this is where we are. And similar for me, in a lot of ways, I have always been aware of myself, but I think having you to it's almost been like a form of shadow work to me, it feels like, because we receive things differently. We come from different backgrounds. There are a lot of differences, but at the same time, there is something that continues to keep us connected, like, and still in sync with each other. And I think that's really fascinating. And it's helped me realize like where the things that I thought were weird is really just because I'm different, or, what I was experiencing is not what somebody else is going to experience on their journey. And so, just as valuable as it has been for other people to listen to our stories, it's been just as valuable for me to be a part of it. And so I don't know. What do you think about it? Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing that we're making this for others to explore different topics related to spirituality and kind of find their own path, I I have felt very compelled to tend to my own house, you know, and and so I can relate to what you're saying for sure, but also having that at times a mirror with you
Yeah.
um, is um, is really helpful to reflect a little deeper. And at times, we don't agree completely on something, and that's good too. Makes me think a little more. But I've noticed with different topics that the conclusions that I came to, with regard to, psychic abilities, gifts, connections, shadow work, all of it, we are really similar,
Yeah.
and having that synchronicity drives me to keep going forward too, and really surprises me many times when
Yeah.
you're like nodding your head. I'm
Yeah.
like, no way,
Yeah, I think the synchronicities were just kind of out of this world. Like those moments where I don't know, I can't even think of one because it was just so many that came up where we were talking. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, is this really happening right now? Are we really saying the same thing at the same time? Are we like, do we have the same opinion where in most situations I wouldn't? I think it was a crystal episode we did, and we started talking about a crystal. Like it was just all of these things that just came up, and I was like, wow, like this is absolutely fascinating. And I know that regardless, you said it's not really a podcast to you, me either. Regardless of how this turns out, it's not really about like the like how good it is. I think I've gotten more out of just being in connection with you, in partnership with you, and literally just growing with you.
Thank you. I feel the same way. And it really reminded me, once again, I think I've said this on a few different episodes, that as much as people are different, our humanity is the same, and people of very different backgrounds and places that they live, everything. There's a common thread, and
Yeah.
I I love spirit or God or whatever you call it so much that I just feel like that's where the thread comes from. The thread is love, which essentially is God, to me anyway.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And, since we started doing this, I actually became a Reiki practitioner during this process. And I think some of what the work that we've done has actually led me in that direction. And so, forever grateful.
Mhm. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I don't know if I told you. So I used to, I have told you that I had a shop years ago where was doing healing work with people, child work, hands-on healing. And at that time, I started with Reiki,
Mm.
but it was so long ago. And so recently I'm just about to get my Reiki 1 certificate, and then I'll probably go through to master, all the way.
Oh, yay.
So you inspired me to want to do that. I think, I am of the mindset that anyone can channel energy through their hands, but I do think it's good to just know that framework, and then from there, just like anything, you use your own intuition to build it further. But thank you for inspiring me to kind of go back and say,
Yeah.
okay, let's take a look at this again. And in doing that, I have learned some new things, and I have revisited things that I knew in the past.
Yeah.
So I think it's all a journey, and I think it is great to have kind of a spiritual partner that you're moving through with, to reflect with, and reach new understandings and decide what direction you want to go in.
For sure. For sure. I agree with that. So we can go ahead and take a break and we'll come right back.
Yes. Hello, friends. Wendy Jo here from the Grow podcast. Can you believe it? We're at the end of season 1, and what an amazing journey it's been. I have felt so blessed to have these rich conversations about spiritual topics and tools. Thank you so much, Ashley. I am just filled with gratitude for you. We've also had some wonderful guests this season that have really added value to the conversation. Don't worry, we're planning season 2, and here's a little spoiler alert. It's going to be a season of love. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next season.
Have you ever thought about consuming cannabis but was worried about smoking it or eating it? Or maybe you just want to give your lungs a break, or you had a really bad edible experience. As a healthcare professional, I am very conscious of the multiple ways of dosing your medicine. One of the ways that you can consume cannabis is through a transdermal patch. This is not often talked about. The cool thing about transdermal is that there is a 97% bioavailability to this type of consumption method. Now, the problem is finding a trusted resource to facilitate your consumption. And guess what? I found a product that I support. It's called Synergy SkinWorks. It's a cannabis delivery system that works effortlessly since the medicine goes where the blood flows. Patch on, peace out.
And we're back. So Ashley, what are 2 of your favorite Grow podcast episodes?
So, I went back a little bit and looked at some of the older episodes, and I think, and first of all, I loved them all, but I think one of my first favorites was the toxic positivity one, only because that is so pervasive. After we did that episode, I became more aware of that concept and how it shows up in people, and man, it is bananas, especially in the spiritual world, where everybody is walking around telling everybody to just be happy. And like, it's so hard to watch, because the second that you have a negative emotion, it's like, are we allowed to talk about the sadness or the pain that I might feel? And so having that in my tool belt was absolutely important for a lot of like personal life lessons.
What I think I've committed to recently today is I'm going to be a little bit more intentional about the acknowledgement phase and recognizing what you're going through, and then asking for permission to move on to exploring ways that we can look at it from a different perspective. That's
a really good way to step into a healthier way of being with other people. I don't know if everyone knows what toxic positivity is, so I looked it up. Will read the definitions.
Okay.
Excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations.
Yeah.
I'm like you. I'm anxious for people to get to that next step also. And I've had to, as exploring this topic, I had to do a self-check also. And at home, I realized I was even doing it with my wife. She's all upset about something, and I'm already at the next phase where she's over it. Yeah. Look for the silver lining. It's terrible. That's not helpful to someone. It actually just completely negates their feelings.
Yeah.
And doesn't feel good.
The other one was energy work, where we were exploring the idea of energy. And part of the reason why I wanted to, I ended up getting the Reiki certification is because I realized when we were talking that I do have a sensitivity to energy. And eventually I started to realize that I could sense other people's frequency. I could not sense my own. And so that became like the thing that I was hyper focused on. And that's how I ended up in the Reiki space. Cause I was like, well, if they have this framework and the attunement and all these things that kind of come along with that practice, I was like, well, by the end of it, I should be able to feel something, hopefully, that kind of thing. That was my thinking. So, and I have discovered that and more. And so both of those episodes stand out the most. How about you?
Nice. Well, I just want to comment. So you realized your sensitivity to others, but not with yourself. So in the course, after doing the course, did you notice it more in yourself?
So the and more part, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I am still hypersensitive, but there are a lot of dormant feelings that have overshadowed the frequency that I can sense in others. And so that created a significant block. So through the attunement, the first time I feel like I was wrapped in protection, like it was this bubble of protection around me, like literally, physically, I could feel it. And then when I went for the second attunement, it was almost like my heart was excavated, and all of the stuff that lived in my heart that was sourced in pain and trauma and all these things just started to erupt. And like when I say it was a very painful week after I've gotten the attunement. And still to this day, I still find myself, just kind of tearing up on certain ideas and concepts because it still triggers some of that. And I can feel that in my heart to the point where like, I just want to protect it.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's a really, shows a lot of depth. And I love that you were affected so profoundly in doing the attunement. I think when you use that word, it specifically is why I wanted to go back and redo my Reiki 1 and 2 at least. So, I added brain spotting to my toolbox through this podcast as well, because I realized, I really want to be able to provide even more help to people healing their trauma, and what a great modality it is. But it really is, the teacher actually said, the strongest medicine that you have is your attunement. Yeah. And it's so true. And so that, in addition to our conversations, I was like, I think I need that attunement with the hands-on healing as well. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely agree with that teacher. Attunement is the vital medicine to helping people heal. So, and maybe it could be argued that by focusing on all these topics in a podcast, we are attuning to these topics, and that's why it's helpful not only to us but to others.
For sure, that's a good point. And the reality that we vibrate with the conversations that we're having. So not only are you and I vibing together and becoming of a collective consciousness, but everybody who chooses to participate and go down this journey with us are also aligning or attuning with that consciousness as well. And so
that's a great point, for sure. So my favorite episodes, I also really love all of them, even the beginning ones where I think, it might be really better now if we discuss these topics, and we may revisit them in season 2, but I love all of them. But my 2 favorites would be the shadow work episode. And I loved chatting with Sharetta and felt really attuned to her also. And her insights, I felt like, were so valuable. When she actually sent her bio to me and it said that she learned to do shadow work from her ancestors, I mean, I got goosebumps. Yeah. And, when you talk to her, you feel it, Okay. You feel that connection. And I love that, she calls herself Black Butterfly Oshun. Oshun, just the vital life force, the water in our body. Like, that's where our ancestors are flowing through us, I feel like, So I loved that episode. And it points to the work that I do with people also. I learned, back when I started on the spiritual path, how the inner child work is really part of my gift that I can help people with.
And with the inner child, so it also it ties into the ancestral healing as well. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times our traumas that either was in the DNA, was during the time of conception, or when we was being carried in throughout our childhood. So I have come to the root of certain cycles happen over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And you can be like, I'm going to stop it today, but you still got to get to the root of the problem, Mm-hmm. how they say, like, sometimes your first bully were your parents.
Mm.
And I had to really sit back and deal with that as a parent, because I had to understand that things that happen with my parents or other people's parents, and they didn't know how to handle or control,
Mhm.
they tried to control with their own kids and stuff, not knowing that it was a toxic way of handling things. Like with my kids, if my kids are upset and they're crying, I do not ask them, da 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 da, or be quiet. I'm like, we're gonna process this.
And then the other the other episode that I really loved. So I was like torn actually between first to pick a second one because I loved Healer versus Oracle.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
that one, right? So I almost chose that one, but then spirituality and healthcare.
Oh, yes. I love that one too.
Yeah. It's something that I've thought about for a long time. And I think just exploring the topic openly
Mhm.
and for everyone to hear or watch was freeing for me, because it's something that I don't talk about much when I'm working in healthcare because of the way I was trained, partly, but also people are, you know, well, I live in the Bible Belt now, so people are talking a lot about Christian thought with health and healthcare.
And, it's one of those topics in the mainstream that, like politics and spirituality, you don't really talk about either because of the differences in opinion. And so I guess creating conflict amongst your client, your patient, I guess I could see why that would be the case. But as healthcare providers, I've found that we're deeply spiritual people because of the things that we have witnessed in humans, And so for a lot of reasons, I think it's the spirituality aspect of it is what connects us as providers and patients.
So first of all, I love both of those episodes. Sharetta is an amazing and powerful human. I met her a couple years ago. She's part of the Highline tribe. And so like getting to know her and know like her strengths and like how she manifests and how she brings forward things through her ancestors is absolutely fascinating, to say the least. And then the episode on healthcare and spirituality, that one is near and dear to my heart because I personally don't think we can achieve wellness without spiritual wellness. And that's one area that we don't talk about, to your point. We don't talk about it. And so we ignore it. And then, all these things happen. And as practitioners, we don't really like get a second to decompress from what we witness and what we see and what we experience with people on a day-to-day basis. And, one thing that I learned in doing some of the energy work through Reiki is like how to cleanse your aura in your space. And those are practices that I think needs to be practiced more often because we just kind of carry people's energy with us everywhere we go.
Yeah, I agree. Nobody's talking about that when you're working in a clinic or a hospital or a nursing home, whatever. Oh, hey, maybe take a moment after
Right.
that experience. Whatever it happens to be, whether it's a patient who's having difficulty taking their medications or somebody who has an outburst or somebody who has a crisis, you're supposed to just boom, 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 go to the next one. So both for the healthcare provider and for the patient, if we use some of these principles that are considered spiritual principles, it probably would make for an improved experience for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And especially the patient, because that's usually what people need to recover when their physical body has gone through so much stress.
Right. Yeah. So I love those episodes so much. And, I think like you, I could make a case for loving each and every episode. It's been a great season,
Yeah.
And on that note, we will be right back.
This season of the Grow Podcast has been transformational. For me, that is. Each episode has been able to develop me personally, and it's so cool to be able to hear some of the responses and the feedback from other people too. It's been an absolute pleasure working on the Grow podcast with Wendy, and I'm so excited for what next season has in store for us. Check out season 2 of the Grow podcast.
Hey there, Wendy Jo, co-host of the Grow podcast. Also, Wendy Edge, occupational therapist. And I wanted to tell you about my new business where I'm combining the principles of occupational therapy, coaching, and spirituality, and wellness, of course. On the website, you'll see that I'm doing Osho Zen card readings, spiritual coaching, spirit paintings, and so much more. So if you want, check it out, edgecoachingandconsulting.com.
Have you heard of the Cannabis Nursing School? It's a place where cannabis nursing, entrepreneurship, and spirituality meet. The High Align Tribe is waiting for you, and it's so easy to find. CannabisNursingSchool.com.
And we are back. Oh, I'm feeling a little more sad even. This is the last segment of the last show of season 1. It's just been such a great season, and I think we spent a lot of time discussing topics between the two of us, which people, our listeners and fans, they have told us that they really enjoy those conversations. But I think we've talked about, we'd really like to expand the Grow Podcast community in season 2.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to do that, to have more conversations. And they may be similar topics that we've already covered, but with more points of view to be part of the conversations. And I think that's not only going to help us grow, right? But it's going to help our audience grow, because one of the big things about spirituality is that everybody's spiritual growth in their journey and the things that they choose to participate is all going to look different. And so being able to get some of those insights from different people will hopefully resonate with somebody out there who maybe doesn't resonate with you and maybe doesn't resonate with me.
Right, for sure. I've enjoyed the interviews we have done, and I naturally want to create community. Like in everything that I do, I just start thinking about how that would impact the greater community, what they could contribute, and how that will complement what we have to say, and or oppose. It's good to have some opposition too, and new ideas, fresh ideas. So I'm really excited for season 2 and continuing to grow the Grow podcast and our community and our ideas. It's so great to share ideas with other people.
For sure. And I'm excited about all of that too. So I guess to be continued.
To be continued. We'll see you all on the other side in season 2. And thanks so much for watching and listening. It humbles me every day seeing that people are doing just that and are interested in their own growth, and not only in what we have to say and what others we bring to the show might have to say, but really interested in their own growth, because one person at a time lifts up and starts to grow. It just goes out like a ripple in a pond.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I agree with everything you just said. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley. It's been delightful. I look forward to season 2.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Bye, everyone.